course where you're learning all these special operations skills. You're just guys are dropping. And it was pretty fun. It was like very spy stuff, Like I was dressed up like an Afghani, and I'd be like sitting in a market with just my radio, like my pistol under my pajamas, like mentally preparing for getting mortared, let's say. Because you're there, you can hear it in the air. And you're like, that could land anywhere.
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to Rodeo Time, the podcast. We have in the house Mr. Dallas Alexander. He is Canadian Special Operations, and he's come down all the way from Canada, and he's going to tell us his story. Very interesting story. How long total were you in the military?
Just under 17 years.
Got some intense moments that he's going to share with us. We're going to hear about his music. He's got an album, Dallas Alexander, Can't Blame My Bloodline. So look that up on Spotify. Look him up on Instagram. Follow Spotify, iTunes.
Yeah, it's on every digital platform.
Gotcha. YouTube probably also. Awesome. So look up Can't Blame My Bloodline. It's awesome music. If you enjoy Texas country or good country music, then you're going to like Dallas, and you're going to love these stories. So I'd like to thank my sponsors, Rock and Roll Denim, American Hats, Mountain Up Supplements, Total Feeds, and Can-Am Side-by-Sides, which is right out of Canada. So started up there around you.
I like that.
Yeah. So check out rodeotime.com, everyone, and stand by for this amazing story. Pow, pow. So we've got Dallas Alexander on. My man is from Canada. You're in the military, special operations. You're a musician. I got to hear you on Sean Ryan's show and been listening to your music ever since. That was, I think I listened to the podcast. I don't know when it came out, but I listened to it about 6 months ago. And been maybe 8. Maybe it's been a while.
When was I down there? I think January I went, if that makes sense.
Yeah, so it might have been maybe a full year.
Excuse me. Yeah, I think it was at the start of this or last year, yeah.
So yeah, you got an incredible story. I personally, I know Rodeo Time, I've had, half a dozen, maybe 8 by now, actually military type guests with stories on. There's a lot of rodeo cowboys we resonate with. Just, I don't know, we're a very patriotic bunch.
Yeah.
So we very much appreciate what all you guys do. And
I appreciate what you guys do.
There's a mutual respect.
Yeah, there totally is. There's a rodeo near where I grew up called Lee Park Rodeo in Alberta, Canada. I went every year of my life, I think since I was 0. The year I was born, I went, my parents said, and every single year of my life until I moved out and moved away from there. But
dang.
Yeah, I loved it.
We actually have a lot of rodeo cowboy buddies that are from Canada. There's a lot of rodeos in Canada.
Yeah.
Calgary is the big one.
Yes,
and then I think the second biggest would be Ponoka.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of even smaller ones. And we've got some buddies. The Saddle Bronc world champ for the last couple of years has been Zeke Thurston. He's from Canada. Dawson Hay. There's bull riders from up there. Yeah, a lot of good cowboys come out of Canada. So it's no surprise that you're a big fan of rodeo, because there's a huge culture of cowboys up there and rodeos.
Is it a lot of, do you guys come, is it a circuit? I don't know how it works really. Is it a circuit where a lot of Americans come and do Canadian rodeo as well?
Yeah, so
outside of the Stampede.
Right. So in the U.S., we've got the PRCA, Professional Rodeo Cowboys Association. That would be like kind of our NFL league. There are some amateur rodeos, like the one here in Graham is an amateur rodeo, or an open rodeo, and anybody can enter it. But there's PRCA rodeos, which would be your bigger ones, and Canada has the CPRA, Canadian Professional Rodeo Association, and what they do is they'll co-sanction some of those rodeos. So you'd have to have your CPRA card, but you got Americans that go up to compete in some of those CPRA rodeos, and you'll have Canadians that come down and compete in the PRCA rodeos. Both countries have their own finals. So there's the CPRA finals,
yeah,
and then we call it the NFR here in Vegas. And so I think the CPRA finals are in November.
And NFR just happened, right?
Yes,
yeah.
And then the NFR is in December. So
very cool.
Yeah,
I'd love to get down to that one year.
There's a big Canadian presence. There's a lot of fans, a lot of the families come, and
yeah.
I mean, I bet there's 2, 3, 4 in each event from Canada.
All right, we're representing.
Yeah,
all right.
Yeah, y'all represent for sure. But man, I don't want to sit here and talk about my story too much.
I'm just asking you about rodeo.
Yeah.
Oh, I got a funny story before we begin. So I got in last night at like 1:30.
Yeah.
And so I'm staying at the Airbnb just outside here.
Dale B&B.
It was not open.
Oh, it wasn't?
The door was locked.
Was it?
Yeah. So I had to pick the little.
No kidding.
The little box with this.
Did you try to call
piece
me?
Of a water bottle. I looked at the box and it was something I knew how to pick anyway, and I just cut a little piece out of a water bottle. But I was like, I don't want to call him at 1 because I got in at like 1:30 in the morning. I was like, well, let's just see if I can solve this first. But it's funny. So I apologize for breaking into your place.
Oh, that's hilarious. Yeah. Yeah. So, the Airbnb, it's really slow during this time of year, and January, mid-January, in this West Texas town, hunting season's over. So we usually just block it off, and it'll be like I got some rodeo cowboy buddies that are going to stay in it for a little bit, and there was a Marine that stayed there night before last.
That's what you're saying, yeah.
Veteran with a sign. I don't know if you follow.
Okay,
he runs around with a lot of Black Rifle Coffee guys.
Either sent me his stuff, or I've seen him.
Yeah.
Out and about.
Yeah.
On the World Wide Web.
So he would have been the one that locked it.
Okay.
Probably thinking like, of course, everybody locks them.
Yeah. But I'm standing out there, my little iPhone light on this lock box, and I'm picking it, and I'm like, everybody in Texas has a gun. I am essentially breaking into this place in the middle of the night, and then a couple dogs start barking. I'm like, better hurry. Better hurry.
Not everybody, but some of us. Yeah, some of us. But I'm not going to act like I know how to use it any better than you do. So, to be honest, if somebody came in here, I'm going to pull this out and I'm going to hand it to you. I'm going to say, here, Dallas, you take this.
Go solve whatever's out there.
rather than say, Dallas, get behind me. I mean, I'm a Texan. I've handled guns all my life, and I'm so glad to get to you. I don't just shoot all the time. I shoot so that I know. I've got some guns I've never shot, but I'm also just not oblivious to the fact that, the kind of training that you guys have had, not to mention you've got the longest confirmed sniper kill in the world history of humans. So I'm gonna unapologetically, oh, there's danger. Here's my gun. Take it, Dallas. So anyway, but yeah, that I should have probably. There's a lockbox there. I probably should have texted all the info to get in that, but
figured it out. But I just thought it was funny.
Yeah,
I got to tell them in the morning. I broke in, but I was invited.
Yeah,
I sent a video. I knew I was in the right spot.
Well, so I'd love to hear your story, and I mean, I'd like for you to start it kind of wherever you want. We can start as early as childhood. Sounds like you have some rodeo stories in there, but I'm just intrigued. I'm a fan. I've been following you on Instagram. I like to thank Sean for introducing me to you. I just want to kind of hear your story. What got you interested into going into the military?
I think it was my upbringing. I grew up in a tiny Métis settlement called, so it's like, it's an indigenous community. It's like a mix of our treaty Indian indigenous and the white settlers that came at one point. So it's a tiny, I think maybe 300 people on this. I don't even know how big it was. Thousands and thousands of acres, so tons of space and not a lot of people. And it was just roaming the woods constantly. I was always outside. I was always doing something that was either hockey or being in the forest. And, there's a big hunter community out there. I didn't really hunt, or my dad didn't when I was young, but we always found ourselves, creeping around the woods and stuff. And I never thought anything of it, even when we were, camouflaging up and having like BB gun fights in the forest. I never thought about the military, to be honest. I wanted to be a hockey player when I was younger. And that's what I spent almost any spare time I had, was playing hockey or outside. And then at the tail end of playing junior hockey, I was coming to my last year of junior hockey, and it was kind of decision time. Do I try and make this a career? I was not going to go to the NHL. I could have probably played something like an East Coast semi-pro hockey team or something in Europe. Like I was okay, but I wasn't going to the show.
Yeah.
And it was my last summer. So after my last year of junior hockey, I was working in the oil field in Alberta, Canada. So that's where I'm from, is Alberta. And the guy I was working with had done, I think it was like a 3 or 4 year term with the military. It's just like a communications guy or whatever. But he was telling me that we had this special operations unit. And I didn't believe him at first. I was like, I don't know about that. I didn't even really know we had a military in Canada.
Yeah.
I'm not going to lie. I was like, pretty sure we have some peacekeeping forces, but I don't know. I'm like most Americans. I didn't think we had a military.
It wasn't something necessarily advertised, or they didn't make movies about it.
Mm-mm.
There was no John Rambo.
That's right. So nothing with like a Canadian flag on his, his combats or whatever. So I looked into it. I get onto the dial-up internet, and he was telling the truth. We had a counterterrorism, a tier 1, which is like, there's hostage rescue, and they're doing stuff all over the place, and it blew my mind. And I remember when I found that out, I was like immediately obsessed. My attention went from, do I play hockey or not, to I'm joining the military to get to this special operations unit. Mm-hmm. And then I watched, Black Hawk Down, Tears of the Sun, like a million times over.
Right.
If this is anything like that, that is for me. And it just became my focus. Like, I was
at what age?
Laser beam focused. It was after junior hockey, so probably, I want to say I was probably 23.
Yeah.
23, and then going into 24.
So
something like that.
Relatively mature, borderline like adult.
Yeah, especially for joining, basic training, and it's like there's a lot of fresh 18-year-olds kind of thing.
Do you think that you weren't aware of it just because you grew up in such a small community? Like maybe.
Yeah, it could be like, and I didn't really, I was never big on the news, which I've come full circle, and I'm not big on the news again.
Yeah.
And I never had any family in the military, really.
Gotcha. You just weren't paying attention.
I just was not paying attention. I focused on hockey, and
maybe if you were like in Toronto,
lived in the forest. Yeah, I mean, where you would see reserve
Alberta,
units doing
like
stuff, or
big, maybe like you've got buddies that are going to join, and you hear about it through them. But you're in this little bitty town.
Yeah, so I had no real. I wasn't tracking it.
Yeah. So you're 24.
Yeah, I think it was 23 or 24. So it would have been 2006, 2024 now. I'm 40, so whatever the math is.
Right.
I don't know.
You look damn good for 40, by the way.
Well, thank you.
I would have pegged you for late 30s.
Good lighting in here.
Is that what it is?
Yeah.
Also, you have a really good tan for coming from Canada in January.
I was just in Cabo like 5 days ago.
Really?
Doing a country music getaway thing, yeah.
Well, interesting. So, yeah, anyways, 24, you jump in.
Yeah, so I joined, and you have to do 2 years in the regular force military before you can try out for the unit, like for our special operations unit. I was like, okay, well, let's get it going. That's what I want to do. So I went to the recruiting center, like just gung-ho. I'm like, look, sign me up. I want to go to the infantry. I want to go to JTF2. And they're kind of like, all right, kid, yeah, everybody wants to go to JTF2. And then you do an aptitude test, and they try to push different trades on you. Like, oh, you scored pretty good over here. Have you thought about doing whatever, artillery or Air Force or something like that? And I was just I knew I had read about it. I knew my plan. Like, I want to go to the infantry, I want to try out, do selection, and make it to JTF2. And they told me, they're like, well, the infantry's full. And so I was like, okay, well, just call me when it's not full. And I left. And I think it was a bit of a trick to try and get me in a different trade, because I got a call like 2 days later. We got a spot for you, and you can go on basic training kind of at the end of this year.
Oh, so that's whenever, like, you weren't even involved yet. You were
no, I was just like at the recruiting center.
So they were literally,
me up.
Yeah. So you're like, all right, well, I'm not going unless.
Yeah.
And that was the trick. Okay. Yeah. That sounds like, from what I've heard from, the recruiting offices even here in the U.S., like, sounds like a common type,
a classic
scenario.
Move. Classic recruiting
move.
So I got the call a little while later and ended up going. This was almost 2006. It would have been the end of 2005. Sorry, I went to basic training. Like, that's your initial military basic training,
right?
And I had prepared like crazy. Like, I'd been an athlete, up until then, and I was like, okay, this is Army. Like, this is gonna be hard. I was training like a maniac, and then I got there. I was like, okay, I probably didn't have to train this hard. Like, basic training was not very hard physically. No.
Yeah.
But I mean, they're taking people from everywhere, all walks of life, all different ages, and kind of, as long as you can pass the basic physical test, you get there and they think they're going to whip you into shape, kind of thing. But
also, maybe, I'm not sure about Canada, but like at that point for us, like, we were taking anybody, in Zach's words, like, if you had a pulse.
Oh, that's what it was.
So that might have been Canada too.
That is definitely who goes into basic training. Yeah. And
so if you were an athlete at all, you were probably ahead of the curve.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Yeah. And I prepared. Like, I was like
and
ready. Like, I gotta go to special operations. I gotta be ready. And then basic training physically was down here. Now, it was a big mental shift, because they're like, you get in, they shave your head, and everyone's yelling at you. I'm like, why is everybody so angry? Just like, clean this and fold that and do this, and like, and I get it. They're taking, again, people from all walks of life. And they're like, we got to, in a short amount of time, relatively speaking, we got to give this person some kind of discipline. We don't know where he came from. Has he ever lived on his own or not? So it's like, they're meticulous to detail, and making your bed and polishing your boots and all these things.
Yeah.
That part I found it more annoying than anything. I was like, all right. I was very focused on just wanting to get to JTF2.
Was it, so it was a lot like Full Metal Jacket for the, like the US?
Yeah.
Very similar.
Yeah, like that.
Up there.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's just like, you're doing that stuff to obstacle courses, and you're in the mud, and everyone's yelling all the time. And
yeah.
So it was like that. Yeah. I didn't, the sleep, a little bit of sleep deprivation, nothing crazy until some of the exercises at the end. But anyway, so there's that basic training, and then it went into kind of more specific soldier and infantry stuff. And then I got sent to Edmonton, Alberta, to 3 PPCLI, and I got there in the summer of 2006. So that was the battalion I was first posted to. Where I'm like, okay, I gotta do my 2 years before I can tell them I want to, sign up and go on selection. And I had a great time there. Like, got in, and I got some really good. I had some good luck. Like, when I got in, there was the platoon and company I was going into had just got back from Afghanistan, and I guess they had like a pretty rough tour. So there's a bunch of guys leaving. So a bunch of new guys kind of filled in these places, which meant we were getting, great, like, the para course and reconnaissance, and I ended up getting sniper course right away in that first year, which is like, it's not really heard of in the battalion, but because there was a mass kind of exodus from at least this company, there was space. So as long as you were performing in these courses, you could keep getting them. And I was like, well, if I'm going to be here for 2 years, I might as well be learning stuff. So I got my first sniper course there, reconnaissance, para, some machine gun stuff, and then I let my chain of command know immediately, like, I want to do selection for JTF2, as soon as I'm eligible, which is 2008. And it was good. It was like a really supportive unit. Guys worked out really hard and trained hard. We had a bunch of guys going to selection, and it was a little intimidating. I was training with some guys that were like machines, and like far fitter than I
Right.
And then you'd see them go to selection. You don't hear anything about selection. It's like this secret thing. And then they'd come back like a few days later.
Yeah.
You're like, well, what happened? I can't tell you, but I just wasn't, and I'm like, oh my God, like, what are they doing over there?
You mean like they didn't make it?
They didn't make it. They get cut a few days later. Like, so the selection is 7 days. We would be tracking, right? Like 3 of our guys are going, 4 of the guys are going. Oh no, 2 of them came back. Oh, so-and-so's back 3 days later. Day 4, and like, nobody made it. You're like, wow, what's happening over there?
Yeah.
So that part was intimidating. But I spent the 2 years in battalion, training, and I didn't deploy. I was supposed to be on one tour to Afghanistan, and I kind of got tricked. But anyway, it didn't end up happening while I was in battalion, which I was very disappointed about, actually. I wanted to have a deployment before I went to the unit. But speaking with the recruiter there, they're like, not required. You're going to deploy lots when you get here. But I still wanted it.
Yeah.
But anyway, that didn't happen. So yeah, I trained and tried to learn as much as I could while I was there in battalion. And then in 2008, so I got to battalion 2006, 2008, I did my selection, and I passed it somehow.
Yeah. So it's only 7 days?
7-day selection. And then, which they call it like the second phase of selection. Well, there's like a few phases. So the first one is you have to do a physical test at your battalion, harder than the normal one. When you get in, you have to do like psychological evaluations. There's a bunch of things. And then they'll take all of these files from people who have passed all the physical tests and got the appropriate scores, and then divide it up into a bunch of serials, and you're invited on selection. So they run a bunch of 7-day serials. If you're successful and you pass the 7 days with the criteria where they say, okay, you can go on what we call a Special Operations Assaulter course. Excuse me. That's, it's like varies between, it's like a 9 and 10-month course. And that's like another part of selection. So through that entire course where you're learning all these special operations skills, it's, you're just, guys are dropping. And,
yeah. So you can get kicked out then. Too.
Yeah. There's a lot of like, safety is kind of the biggest thing. Like if you can't pick up like CQB stuff, like kill house, it's all, you get to live fire. So you're like, a group of guys moving through a building, live fire, different targets. Like safety was big. So there's a lot of guys that get tossed out for just like not being able to pick it up at the speed that you have to go for like, hostage rescue things and stuff.
It sounded like, having read the books and listened to podcasts of guys, going through selection for tier 1 units here in the U.S., it sounded like CQB was what got a lot of guys here too.
Yeah, that was what got the most for us. And it was like the basic CQB, just like when you're learning it, is where you see, for the most part, there's some like, an advanced CQB where you're helicoptering in or jumping or rappelling, whatever it is, some of that. But most of the guys, I think, it's like when you're first learning that skill set is where you would see where there would be a divide. And it was, I don't know if it was just processing time or whatever it was, because you have to make just smart decisions, and there's like real bullets flying everywhere. So
it's crazy like, to hear like who and why certain people were good at it and others weren't. I don't know.
Yeah,
I have
and
no idea.
Some of it, I'm like, it's hard to pinpoint why. Someone was good and someone just couldn't pick it up in that time frame or whatever.
Yeah, but you did.
I did almost barely. Like I enjoyed it, but I remember I was on one of our like last testing day runs, and I had some like what they call safeties. Still to this day, there was 2 of them where I was like, that I disagree. Even after like now going to teach CQB and all this stuff, I'm like, those 2 shouldn't have been. But either way, I was like walking a fine line on the last test where if I would have got a safety, I would have been eliminated down the recording thing. So the last run came down to it, and it was like,
wow,
a clean run. And I was like, oh boy.
Thank God.
Good.
Yeah. So CQB is close quarters battle, right? Yeah. So, and essentially it's just whenever you're maybe clearing the house or going into a room, and you have to process everything very quickly because, you can't shoot the wrong person. There's enemies. There's just people that are non-threats. And then, then you have to make those decisions. But that was not something that was really taught as much prior to 9/11 and, the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan, right?
Yeah.
Like, I don't know. I don't even know much about the U.S. military, but listening to these guys talk, it's like prior to that, it wasn't as big of a focus. And then after the war got going, a few years into it.
Yeah. Yeah, well, there was still, FBI, and we had our CMP, which we ended up taking the unit over from. They were doing like hostage rescue CQB.
Mm-hmm.
I think 9/11 and going to Afghanistan and learning lessons there changed a lot how it was being done, but it also made it become a focus like on all the way from, infantry battalions, I guess, like you guys, like your Army and Marines and all this stuff, also into special operations, where I think a majority of it before was like kind of only special operations or hostage rescue teams were doing it, but it definitely became more prevalent. And it's two different types, really. Sort of the way we train is like, if it's a hostage rescue situation, like you are running, like it's very, very fast.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's quick in rooms, assessing threats immediately, and like you are sprinting. There's no time wasted. If it's like combat clearance, we call it, you're hunting someone, you have a target, you're going to
more methodical.
It's methodical. You're taking into consideration like your safety and cover when clearing rooms versus we need to get this hostage like before something happens, if they know we're here or whatever the case is.
Right.
Yeah.
Dang. It's so interesting. And it's so, we were talking about with Zach yesterday, just being in combat, how it appears to me, and he was, kind of halfway confirming, and we were talking about how like you could do everything right that day, and you just happen to maybe be standing in the wrong place.
Oh, totally.
And something go wrong, and it's not your fault. It's not anybody's fault. You're just in the wrong spot at the wrong time.
Mm-hmm.
And that seems
it's probably
like
the bad guy's fault, but
right. It seems no more truer in CQB.
Oh yeah.
Like you do everything right going through the door. It just happens to not be your day.
Oh yeah. Like you can only mitigate so much risk
mm-hmm.
in a building with
mm-hmm.
guns and explosives, and whether it's IEDs or grenades. Like there's so much, which is why I think we train so much, or why special operations train so much. It's like that fraction of a second can make the world of difference.
Right.
Like it can be the difference between life and death for you or your teammate. Like just a split second. So that's why, I don't know how many, a lot of guys, but it's like you're training your pistol draw till it's like, you're just shaving, just like that initial shot time, target acquisition, all the stuff they're training is just shave, like bits and bits of seconds off, because, it could be the difference between
mm-hmm.
kind of life
and death.
Yeah. And then there's stuff, like you said, like just, it happens,
Yeah.
War's chaotic, but you want to stack the deck in your favor as much as possible.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's why, we train so much, or did. Now I'm a civilian.
So you get out of your 7 months. What would that be called if the week is called selection?
So selection, and then that's the Special Operations Assaulter course.
Okay.
So you're on course. I think mine ended up being 8 months long, and there was some of they call it continuation training. So it's like extra medical training, tactical driving, and like parachute insertion. So Hey-Ho and Halo. That was cut a little bit short on my course, and we ended up doing all that stuff after because we needed to, I always say deploy, but we were still in Canada. We had the Olympics in Canada,
mm-hmm.
and so we had teams on each coast. We were like just there in case anything happened, and we're recceing all the different venues things were at if anything kicked off, and we were just kind of staged in the mountains ready. So we got cut short a little bit on that stuff. And and then the rest of it, the rest of the courses or the rest of the stuff we missed, we just caught up on. After.
Gotcha. So that's late 2008?
That would have been, so selection was 2008. My Salter course was 2009.
Okay.
It was like essentially, I think the course went to January to end of September, something like that. And then we got put into different squadrons, and then we went and did the Olympic, getting ready for that. So there's a lot of like working in the ocean, we call it MCT, like maritime counterterrorism. Mm-hmm. So like if there's, hostages or a situation on a ship, if it's at anchor, if it's sailing, whatever it is. So a lot of that stuff. And then circled back to kind of some of the other courses and stuff that we had missed on the tail end. And
so the Canada military, you don't necessarily have all of the, obviously you wouldn't have the same branches of military that the U.S. has. So like you guys did a lot of the same things that maybe the Army and the Navy would do. Is that right? Or
well, we have Army, Navy, Air Force.
Okay.
We don't have Marines. I don't know what your other branches are. The Coast Guard has its own or something. So we have Army, Navy, Air Force. And then now, when I first got in, we like JTF2 and CSOR and like an helicopter squadron. We were just like each our own individual special operations units kind of working together. Now it's another branch. So it's Army, Navy, Air Force, and CANSOFCOM.
Okay.
Which is our Canadian Special Operation Forces Command. So it's sort of the same. We're missing a few, and you guys have like 1 million more soldiers than we do. But it's kind of structured the same.
Mm-hmm.
So like and we've worked with your guys a bunch, but where like, like SEAL Team 6, the Bin Laden guys, they have like dive capability, some maritime hostage rescue stuff. But I guess your Delta guys do as well, I think. But so they kind of cover the gamut of, in the water, in the mountains, on land.
Right.
From a special operations context, we do the same.
Gotcha. So 2009, is that your first deployment?
2009, yeah, but I mean, like, it's in brackets because we were in Canada. We were just ready for the Olympics. And the first deployment overseas for me was outside of like a training kind of mission, would have been 2010. 2010, I went to Afghanistan.
So we were out of Iraq by then.
Well, it was the first Iraq was I think it was over.
Yeah.
And then we were in the Afghan time. It was before, like, I call it the second Iraq kicked off again.
Gotcha. How was your first deployment? What was that like?
I thought it was really cool. At the time I was a little disappointed. I was a backup, like a spare, so I was training as a spare on this team in case something happened and someone couldn't go or whatever, to go do like sort of in and around Kandahar, but it was doing like hits. It was doing what we call hits, like DAs and stuff, where you intelligence, you have a target and you go try and get them. And that's what I was training for, and that's what I was excited to go do. And then it was looking like I wasn't gonna be there. They weren't gonna need a spare. So a sergeant major came to me and he was like, "Look, there's this other opportunity. You can go to Afghanistan as well. It's a little bit different role and context." And it was doing what we call source handling operations. So like we were out of Kabul, and it wasn't doing hits. It was like doing it's like the tactical planning and security, so that our intelligence service could meet up with sources, essentially. So like people that had information on, let's say, Al Qaeda, people that were affiliated or even members, but they're willing to take some pay for some secrets, but they can't just go say hello in the street. You know what I mean? So we'd have to plan these big operations where it was, we would do surveillance on the person, and then you're making them move in a way where you're watching so that you can confirm they're not being surveilled before we pick them up, double check that they're not being surveilled, and then bring them to like a safe house or a debrief area, and do the same on the drop off. So they're completely disconnected from ever having been with a Canadian. You know what I mean? So there's the physical on the ground, and there's obviously the electronic with phones and stuff. So there's a big game, I guess, to learn with it. But I thought it was really cool. You know, I enjoyed it. It wasn't what I got in to do, but looking back on it now, I'm like, it was pretty fun. It was like very spy stuff, you know? Like I was dressed up like an Afghani, and I'd be like sitting in a market with just my radio, like my pistol under my pajamas, sitting on a motorbike, and be like, watch a guy or drive down the street. He gets on my bike, go down, walk down another alley, picked up by a van, and we got like, it was pretty cool stuff in the end.
Yeah, like born identity, born supremacy stuff.
There was a lot of that. And
how much of the time during that deployment are you working with U.S. guys?
We didn't really. There was like some helping each other out here and there. With the U.S. guys on that deployment, it was more just like social events. Or we'd go to like the shooting range with them when we didn't have an operation, or like there's a lot of networking. Mm-hmm. So in that particular one, it was more just like, hey, let's go meet up with the U.S. dudes, or there was like Aussies and New Zealand, just like everyone's in the space. Yeah. So we'd be like, let's go, shooting range. Let's go grab a beer with these guys and just look, something's going on. If you could be on call tonight in case something happens, like, just helping each other out.
Percentage-wise, what presence did each of the different countries have in Kandahar right then?
Oh, well, this was in Kabul.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and I don't know. The Americans always have the
Kandahar,
biggest.
That's right.
The Americans always have the biggest presence, I find, anywhere that I've gone.
But like 90, 10?
No, maybe not that much. Not compared to all the countries, but like they're like, let's say U.S. is like 60%.
Gotcha.
And then everyone's kind of just, it's like everyone's pitching in to Team America. Yeah. Everywhere we went, it was kind of like that.
Yeah. So whenever I was in high school, I kind of wanted to go to the Marines, but that was always second behind my dream of rodeo. Okay. And, God is serious enough to like, I was kind of training with a buddy, but then I just never went to the office. He took off and I did, to the recruitment office. Yeah. And he went to go and I didn't. He couldn't pass the hearing test. Made fun of him for that all summer. Yeah. But I didn't. I went and rodeoed. And now it's all this time has passed and 20 years of the war has been come and gone. And so rodeo cowboys, like I said, we tend to be very patriotic, and whenever we are listening to the national anthem at the beginning of the rodeo, we're literally in a town. It is that town's party for the year. Yeah. And we are the celebrities that they're coming to watch. And so we get to be, 2 or 3 times a weekend, every weekend, we're going to these and we get to live this freedom that, I don't know, the rodeo lifestyle is the epitome of freedom. It's one of those lifestyles that I think, you're your own boss and you've got to perform well to continue to do it, because you got to win your pay. You're not just getting paid to do it. But regardless, we get chill bumps during our national anthem, as I'm sure Canadian rodeo cowboys get the same during theirs. And so I say all that, like, having not gone, like, I've always just had like a deep respect and watchful eye on what was happening, but obviously not ever having been to those countries, and definitely during war, like, I'm now having to piece together all these stories. And so it's like, it's really like, it's crazy to watch you and Sean talk, because there's just a foundation of truth and knowledge. And like, you guys knew the smells, the atmosphere, the vibe, the culture of those other, the Afghanis, the good guys, the bad guys. And you could feel an enemy as he walked in, like, all those things. It's so intriguing to me, even to just watch you guys talk. And, so anyhow, now that I guess that's where that's why I'm asking these random questions, just because, like, I'm just trying to get my mind wrapped around. I've read about 15 of these books that you guys have written about your time over there, and so I'm piecing it together. But I'm also a little slow.
Yeah, I think it's cool to see how it all overlaps, with the different stories and guys that are telling their stories, which I think is good. I think it's inspiring to, the next generation. I think it's good for the people, that support it, but also essentially pay for it.
Mm-hmm.
To have these stories and stuff come out and just see where they overlap. Like, oh, that was in Afghanistan this year. And then we were there in this year. Oh, I met those guys here, and then that and this. And like, it's funny on the Sean Ryan podcast. It was after I'd done the podcast, this ranger who was a buddy overseas, we were deployed with kind of a big group. And he's like, hey man, check out this picture. And he sends me a picture. And we're having like a Christmas party at our little camp, and it's myself and a bunch of guys and him, and then Kyle Morgan, who was also on Sean Ryan's show.
Mm-hmm.
And I'd reached out to him, and we kind of connected on Instagram. And I'm like, man, this guy looks so familiar. I know, seen him somewhere.
Yeah.
And he sent the picture, and I was like, oh, that's what it was.
That's wild.
And I sent it to Kyle. I'm like, look at this. He's like, what a small world. Like just these stories overlapping. And
that is crazy.
So it's cool to see it all piece together and hear the different perspectives and experiences that other guys had too, because it's all different, like tour to tour, roto to roto, town to town, depending on where you were. Like it's pretty interesting.
We have a similar dynamic, and obviously the stakes are much different, but like with rodeo cowboys, how we'll go to, like this weekend, there'll be guys going to different rodeos, Fort Worth, or there's Canadians down here right now going to Fort Worth Stock Show and Rodeo. And you come from all over, you go to this rodeo, and there's a baseline of commonalities that you'll have with that person. And you can start a conversation at a different level than if you just bumped into someone at the grocery store.
Yeah.
You have no idea their background. But if you're both entered in this rodeo, then obviously, that person has a same, you're doing the same trade, you've got the same level of knowledge, and like the conversation starts in a different place.
Yeah, and I think there's probably a mutual respect or camaraderie off the bat.
Yes.
Too.
Yeah. So helping each other behind the chutes.
Yeah.
And I imagine that's much more intense but also very similar with you guys.
I think it'd be similar for sure. It's not always intense. There's a lot of like just chilling downtime.
Yeah.
Like, you're hanging out with guys.
Well, I guess maybe the connection might be more intense just because of
maybe after, doing some stuff together for sure.
Yeah. Because like if you literally just almost died together.
Yeah.
So action-wise, not as much going on in your first deployment as you anticipated?
Well, it ended up being action, but just weird, different action. Like, it's just not what I expected. Mm-hmm. I was ready to go do what I'd been training for. I'm like, let's go.
Run and gun.
Get guys. And then I was like in a completely different world. But it was like you're still running around Afghanistan every day. And now it's like not in the way that you were
any sort of, like any bullets go by you?
Yeah, but I don't even think they were intended at me. Like we'd be like somewhere and be like, just shooting breaks out. And we're like, oh, we're in the middle of an operation here. It's like,
gotcha.
I'm hidden in the back of a truck with like just a gun port. And I'm like, okay, if it comes this way, this is our contact drill, we break it. But like one of the craziest things is there's a buddy there who used to be in our unit, and he had opened like, I wouldn't call it an Airbnb, but he had a building where he housed like embassy overflow and stuff. And it was like a secure compound, relatively speaking. And he had a restaurant and a bar and stuff. So we'd gone over, we made that connection as soon as we got there. And one day,
just a random.
Well, he was like, he was a guy from our unit. So we knew he was in Afghanistan. We knew he'd opened a business in Kabul.
So he's no longer actually.
No, he was no longer
military.
active. No.
Yeah.
But we'd gone to his place a few times.
It wasn't like an active guy with a side hustle.
No. Which would have been brilliant. So he became our buddy. I'd never met him before that, but we were having a barbecue one day, and we did like a barbecue once a week, and we'd invite like other team guys over or other intelligence agency people to like the house in the city that we lived in. we were doing a barbecue, and I'm like, okay, well, let's go get the barbecue buns. Let's go get the stuff. So we're driving downtown. I was like, oh, this store, there's a better one down the block. I saw some better barbecue, some hamburger buns down there. So we skipped the store, close to our house, and we go to this one, get the buns, get back to our house, and we hear like chaos. And that was pretty close. And you're used to hearing stuff in Afghanistan. There's always stuff blowing up, gunfire or whatever. This was like close. And then we got a call from him, and he's like, it was very unclear. He's like, I need your help. Don't let them take me. I'm stuck right now. And we're like, what the hell? There's just one of our guys. I'm like, well, what'd he say? Where is he? Like, I don't know. And then he calls back again. He's like, I'm at this store. And so we're like, what he ended up telling us was like, he'd been shot. And he's like, come and get me before whoever else kind of comes to get me. And it ended up being at that grocery store that we just like bypassed down the block. And two guys went in, and I think it was, they were throwing out hand grenades first, and then they were shooting. And I think one of them like blew himself up in this store, and he was in the back. And he was just like shopping, and he like engaged one of the guys with his pistol. He ended up getting shot, I think a couple times. The whole store blew up. And so once we kind of got that information out of him, we run out the door, just a quick plan. And I remember so wild. Like I ran into the store, and I had like a little Indiana Jones satchel. It just had like a med kit in it, a couple of DDs and frags, and like I had my pistol. Long gun was in the truck, and I went in, and it was just like this fresh, exploded grocery store. You know what I mean? So it's like blood on the street, and it smells all kinds of smells. And he wasn't in there. And then we were like, okay, well, you go this way, this way, this way. We kind of split up in 2-man teams. I'm like running down the street, trying to find where he is. So it was like, I didn't expect that to happen. Something like that, like a grocery store attack, and then a friend's in there, and now we're running down the streets looking for. It was like not something we really trained for.
Yeah.
So it was things like that, and there was always,
So how did it end?
So yeah, sorry, just leave you hanging. Dun, dun, dun. So there ended up being there was another Canadian guy there working with like, I can't remember what he was working with, some NGO or something, and he ended up finding him as they were like he had made his way out of the grocery store. So we got all the story afterwards. He'd made his way out of the grocery store and down the block, and he was like, because he called again. He's like, I'm between these two vehicles, and I'm like, oh my god! There's like, look for a white Toyota in Afghanistan, like, running down the street, and I guess he ended up another Canadian that was there with another agency had like found him on the street, and they got in an ambulance, like went to the local hospital, and then ended up moving, I think, to what was the base there? Like Kaya or whatever it was called, near the airport. But yeah, so he was found, and we're like, okay, good. And we kind of went back to our barbecue. And just like, well, it's a Friday or whatever day it was,
Dang.
Debriefed it. But it was like, because you're in a big city like that, there's just so much. And there would be, there's always like some vehicle blowing up in this alley or mall, or someone got hit over here, and you're just in it, and you're just trying to do this like little piece of your job, but
right?
You're in a chaotic city,
so
like you plan every operation. We're like, okay, we're going to do it over here, because it's very like specific to where you're going to do it. If you're like, look, we're going to tell the source to pick up his phone on this corner, walk down this alley, turn right, get on a motorbike, go down under this bridge, across this bridge, and get in a van. Like, you can't just do that anywhere. Like, it all has to be, you have to do the reconnaissance first. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So if like something happened in that area, like, oh shit, okay, we got to move it to wherever the backup place was, or just like the completely different side of the city, or tell him, can he meet tomorrow? And if not, then, so it was interesting. I learned a lot.
So was sniper even in your job title at that point?
No. Well, because I hadn't even done the sniper, like the JTF2 sniper course yet.
Okay, gotcha.
But because I was a sniper in battalion, like I'd done the sniper course, and I taught on one before I went on selection, our kind of home defense plan had a little bit of sniping built in.
Gotcha.
If anything happened, yeah.
So you get back to Canada. How long was it before your second deployment?
So that one was 2010 and into 11. I think it ended up being 9 months or something, close to 10 months. We got extended a couple times, and it ended up being a while. So it was 2011 when I got home. And then that was really the tail end of Afghanistan. So there was a bit of a pause, and I remember being like, well, now what do we do? Like, and I think it was until 2014, and it was just, like, we're still going hard. You train every day. We were going different training missions here and there, and like, but like to really be deployed, it wasn't until 2014.
Really?
Yeah, I think it was 2014. So it was like that's 3 years almost.
Wow.
At least 2.5 years. And that seems like a long time.
Right.
And I was new to the unit, and I wanted to deploy. And I'm like, are you telling me we don't have anywhere to go right now? Like, all I heard about was like, you're gonna have roto after roto after roto. You're gonna get to go over as much as you want, kind of thing.
What does roto mean?
Like a rotation. So
gotcha.
Yeah, like a deployment. And then I do one, which was not even the type of deployment I wanted, even though I enjoyed it. It's like, that's it? Like, what do you mean? Like, I put all this, like, I wanted to come here to do that job. So yeah, we had to just be patient and train.
Freaking trained for 3.5 years.
Yeah. And then Iraq kind of, or the next set of missions in Iraq kicked off, and I think it was 2013 or 2014 I think it was early 2014. It was like what we call Roto Zero, so the first guys going over. And then I went on this, like, the second Roto, which, because we're the military, make it confusing, is called Roto 1. And I just went with, I was part of a sniper team. It was just 2 of us. So I had a sniper team. So in that period off, I'd done now my JTF2 sniper course, and I'd moved to being a sniper in our unit. So from an assault squadron to the sniper group.
Gotcha.
So that was my first deployment in Iraq, was as a sniper, and I went with like my team leader and myself attached to like another group of dudes. And actually, my sniper TL is my brother-in-law.
Gotcha.
He was not at the time, but is currently. And it was such a different experience than the first tour, and it was also very different than what I expected, because we got there and ISIS was like steamrolling Iraq, and now they were kind of held at the border, like, of Kurdistan, which everybody else is just Iraq, but in Iraq it's very much Kurdistan and Iraq, and the Kurds just like made this defense line, just holding it. ISIS was attack, they would try and hold them off, try and penetrate, get pushed back, push forward. Like, it was like very old school. Like, you're on this trench line essentially.
Dang.
And then the bad guys are over there, and then like, this is the good guys. It was crazy. So a lot of our support was sniper fires, obviously, and airstrikes. So we would like just sit on the mountainside for days and look for targets, and then call in airstrikes. If we had a JTAC, they would do that, and we would be supporting with sniper fire if they came, within sniper range.
At that point, were you working with Americans?
Oh yeah, we worked with Americans a lot on that tour. All kinds of different ways too. Like, we were staying at a little house just back from that line, a couple K back, and it was like a Canadian team, but there was a bunch of like, you're just collaborating a lot. Sometimes they'd come out on the OPs with us. There was like Green Berets a lot. And then your tier 1 guys, it was more working together. I'll say doing other things.
Yeah.
that one's not mine to tell. But yeah, we got to work with a lot of Americans, which was really cool.
Was there how did they did they give you guys a certain respect level, or was there like
for sure
riff?
Or? No. It was like there's a good mutual respect. I think there's always like with the tier 1 guys, there's always like okay, well, let's
they wonder,
like, let's just see, and then we'll anytime we'd been deployed with them or sharing a fob, like a base, or working together closely, we'd do like shooting competitions every week, or like go do CQB, and then it'd be like, oh, okay, yeah, you guys are good. Like once you're like, you know, Canadians are winning the shooting competition, you know, and then like it's like neck and neck, and like that kind of stuff. They're like, okay,
there's a certain respect level.
Like, all right, you're in, you're good. Yeah. And then when you go deploy, you know, it's like, okay, you're cool up there, like it's earned, which
you're on the same team at that
I totally
point.
understand, you know, you got to earn it, and I get that, because you know you have to do that here to get there.
Were there any surprises for you dealing with any of those different branches, like somebody that like was way more prepared than you thought, or maybe way less? I mean, obviously it could be case by case, and maybe there were.
Yeah, I was surprised at, like, man, the amount of technology that America has
really
for war fighting.
Yeah.
Like that was crazy.
Yeah.
I was blown away.
At the tier 1 level, or just?
Yeah, at the tier 1, like what you have access to, like what, and that's the biggest difference I've ever seen in all of the tier 1 units, is like from us to go work with you guys, the access to things and technology that you have is mind-blowing.
Dang.
Like dude to dude shooting range stuff, good to go. CQB, you know, para, all this stuff. Like we cross train and all kinds of stuff with you guys, but like what you have to back up that force kind of thing, if that makes sense. It was mind-blowing.
Dang.
Like, yeah.
Interesting. So, how often were you seeing action on that deployment?
That one was a lot. That one was like, that was very busy. So I was kind of doing two different things. We were on this kind of front line, and then we would be doing hits in the cities. So even within Kurdistan, there was obviously still bad guys that would infiltrate somehow, been there, working with, you know. So we would get, you know, all the intelligence down, and we would go do hits like in some of the different cities. So that's what I was looking for the first tour. You know, it's like your alleyway in town, going into this building, grabbing this guy in the middle of the night or whatever. And then on the front line, it was supporting with sniper fire and airstrikes. Yeah. And that's where most of it, like all the city stuff, was generally pretty, I thought it was like fun. That's the right word to use, but it wasn't action really, because like just, you know, in the middle of the night, there's 5 guys in your room with like night vision. You're not putting up much of a fight at that point.
Yeah.
But on the front line is where it was like, there was a lot of, there was some gunfire and stuff exchanged, but even that, because of the ranges, it had to be snipers. Like if someone came within like AK range, they were getting wasted immediately. Yeah. So they learned not to do that really fast. And then these like rockets and mortars were the big ones, which is like, I've said this before, it's a strange thing, because I never really thought about it, like mentally preparing for getting mortared, let's say, because you're there, you can hear it in the air, and you're like, that could land anywhere.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, that could land right on my head.
Right.
That could land right over there. And if we're getting attacked by mortars, which happened a handful of times, it's like, boom, right over there. Well, I'm glad I wasn't that guy, you know, like, or it hits like, it's crazy, because it's such a mental thing that I didn't really think about.
You hope you're standing in the right spot.
Yeah. And I remember the very last job of that tour, I was like viciously sick. I had like terrible diarrhea. Sorry, everybody. And it was like the last OP we were going on before we went home. And my now brother-in-law, Chris, was my TL. He's like, look, stay back from this one. Like, you're obviously, you know, you're not doing well. I'm like, no, there's no way I'm not coming on like the last. And it was like one of the busiest, because it was like maybe, I want to say 15 or 1700 meters to like a town. Mm-hmm. And so that was one of the, just a few places where it was such a close proximity to like a built up area. So they still had guys in there fighting from the town, which means it was all within sniper fire range. So I was like, I'm not missing this one. But I remember I was like on the line, crawling back, running back to like the worst like toilet setup you can imagine in the field, and like going back to the line, and then we started getting mortared in this position. And I remember I was like sitting on this like, I don't know, it was like this weird bucket thing with mud around it, and I was like, just don't let me get hit like this. Dang. Don't let me get hit on this. Don't let it be like this. You know?
That's hilarious.
I found it pretty funny that's what I was thinking. Like, well, I'm on this like disgusting outhouse or whatever. But it was just something that surprised me. I never thought about mortars. Like we never really talked, you know, like it was just, I don't know. It wasn't in my brain. I was ready, like, okay, bullets and gunfire and, you know, grenades and RPGs and all this stuff. I just never thought about mortars. And it was a big part of their like playbook.
How many days a week did you find yourself sitting behind a long gun in a sniper type position?
In that first tour, a lot. We tried to get out a lot. There was, when we first got there, there was like some stuff that happened, and there was a Canadian casualty from like our kind of little brother unit. And so they put a big hold on a bunch of operations. When we first got there, it was a bit slow. We were trying to navigate. They put in a bunch of new rules, and you can't do this and you can't do that. So we were trying to figure out how we could, you know, circumvent, work in the gray space, we call it,
right,
to get out there. And it took a bit, and then we figured it out. But once we did, like, we were out there as much as we possibly could. It was like, and it would depend if we had other tasks or not. And there would be sometimes we would go, you know, a week or two straight, and then we'd go back into some other cities and towns and do some stuff, and then and come back. But we were trying to be out there as much as possible, because I was like, this was my first sniper deployment. I was like so fired up. The first time we went out, it was a 2-day OP, and like you get into a position like that, and I was sharing with Kurds, and we had some other guys with us, and like you get into what we call an OP routine. So someone's watching all the time, or 2 guys or 3 guys, and then the other 2 or 3, depending on how many people you're with, or like you're chilling out, you're sleeping, you rotate all through the night. Most of the time in the daytime, everybody's up in case something happens. They want to like get out of it. In the nighttime, when it slows down, a couple guys on the glass, and you can go to sleep. You just rotate through kind of shifts. But I didn't sleep at all. I was like, I'm not missing a thing. If something happens, and then I stayed up for 2 days straight, and like my TL, who's like been a sniper forever, was like, all right, I'm going to sleep. Wake me up if anything happens. Just like, you know, he's done it. He's seasoned. He knows.
Yeah.
I stayed up for like 2 nights of not a single thing. Like, didn't see anything. Didn't see anyone. Nothing happened. And I was like, okay, well, maybe next one I'll rotate with you, and we'll go sleep. Because we went to this one because some of the Kurds on the line were like, look, we get attacked from that building every single night. I'm like, oh, perfect. I'm here with a 50 cal. Nothing happened. Not a soul.
Damn.
Yeah. I just ended up really tired.
Yeah.
I chewed a lot of Copenhagen.
So, how long were you over there for that one?
That first tour, I think it was only 4 months.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then you come back home.
Yeah, come back home. So that one was 2014. I can't remember if it overlapped into 2015, if that was like a Christmas tour. But 2014 anyway. And then back home, and you do some like post-deployment leave and stuff, and you get back into training.
Yeah.
Get ready for the next one.
Probably not as long of a wait before.
No, it was I think I went back in the end of 2016.
Yeah.
So 2014 I was back. I think it overlapped 2014 and 15, and then I went again, I think the end of 2016.
So still
overlapped into 2017.
Almost 2 years. Or a year and a half.
It ended up being like a year and a bit. Yeah.
Yeah. Because
in that time now, that's probably, 3 more deployments, which 3 other sniper deaths went.
Yeah.
Sort of thing. And they had actually cut the numbers of snipers, which made no sense. So the first Roto 0, had a 4-man sniper team, and they were like in a battle space like that. Like, I don't want to say snipers are doing everything, but we're doing a lot.
Yeah.
And then the chain of command was like, oh, we're not going to bring as many snipers on this next one.
Yeah.
Like, what? The recommendation from the sniper TL was like, we need 2 more, actually. We need 6 snipers out here.
Yeah.
They're like, we're going to cut it to 2. Like, chain of command. Okay. So the 2 of us went halfway through the tour. They sent 2 more snipers on ours, which is good. So
but of course.
Down to 2, and then it went back up, and we stayed at that. But even then, you come home, another det goes, another get goes, and then it's a year before you're going again.
Mm-hmm.
So the second one, I think it was the end of 2016 into 2017, I think was the timeline. Yeah.
So how'd that one go?
That one was good. Now, I had been there, and I sort of knew what to expect, but it was still changing rapidly. So, you hear stories, talk to the guys that come home, talk to the next guys, what's happening, where you at. And that was the first tour. So that was my second tour in Iraq, but it was the first time I got into Mosul, which I thought was pretty cool, because I remember I was on a mountainside looking, and it way off in the distance, you could just see some lights. And we're like, that's the city of Mosul. Like, wow.
Yeah.
And I remember turning, I can't remember how old, 30-something, 34 maybe, 33 something. I was on the OP for my birthday, and I was like sitting on this mountain, and I brought a cigar and a little flask, and I was like overlooking like this. It's crazy. You look down the line at night, and it's just like these little lights on this trench line that goes forever. And then you're looking into like no man's land, and then wherever ISIS is. And at Mosul, I remember I smoked this cigar and like had a couple sips of whiskey. I was like, this is a pretty cool birthday. Like, it's like, this is all right,
Yeah.
I was calm that night, and it was just like calm, cool in the mountains. And I was like, it's a pretty unique experience.
No kidding.
Yeah.
Is that the deployment where you had the long shot?
No, so that was the one that I was saying where the first one we were looking at Mosul. The next one, 2016, 2017, is when we actually got into the city for the first time.
Okay.
So it was cool to see from back here, now the progress of a few tours, we're going into the city. And this one, again, was a mix. I was doing sniper stuff, and then like assaulter, I don't know, gunfighter stuff. So a lot of this was in the city, just like your plain clothes, but nighttime. So it's like, here's a target. I'm going to go get him. So it was kind of back and forth with that. And then this one, our deck commander, so we are a 4-man sniper team on this as well. And I remember as soon as we got to country, he's like analyzing this map of Mosul, and he's like, look at the shadow that this building is casting. It's the biggest building in the whole city. And I'm like, wow, I would have never looked at it that way. He's like, we got to get in that building. It's like right on the riverbank. They had just kind of pushed ISIS out of what would have been East Mosul, whatever it was, to the other side. So like the last stronghold now was, I think, West Mosul. I could be confusing these, but either way, there's a river dividing where Iraqis and supporting forces had pushed ISIS to the other side of the river, and they're kind of closing in from all sides. And Mosul was the last stronghold for ISIS in that area. And so eventually, after going in a few times to the city here and there, he ended up selling the chain of command on letting us go occupy this big building, which is the Nineveh Hotel on the river in Mosul. And there was Iraqi, I think, army, police had a presence.
What your shirt says?
Yeah, so this is why I made these shirts, actually. This is like part of my merch, is this Nineveh Hotel.
That's badass.
So I got this picture from like a shoehorn that I found in the hotel. I gave it to an artist. I'm like, can you make this into something I put on a t-shirt?
What is that?
And he's like, hell yeah. So this is like, Nineveh is like a word that goes way back. Like this is like Babylon area. You know, like this is where like the start of everything kind of was. So I don't know what this is. There's some significance because people have recognized it.
Really?
But it used to be, and you can Google it, this hotel, it used to be apparently like this luxury, beautiful spot. And then war broke. Like the room we ended up at the top floor was like Saddam's like presidential suite.
No kidding.
Yeah. So apparently it was beautiful, like gorgeous river.
What was that room like when you were in it?
Oh, it was not presidential. When we got into that building, this building had been fought over and bombed. It was just like, it was an absolute disaster.
Gotcha.
All the ceilings were collapsed. There's just wood and
like a war-torn country type
war-torn building.
Yeah.
I've got some videos I can show you. It's just crazy. It was a mess.
Yeah.
But there was an Iraqi force occupying, I think, the 3rd floor or something, using it, looking out across the river. So we ended up getting approval to go occupy like an OP on the top floor.
So you just have to walk by them every day on your way to work?
Like, yeah.
Hey guys,
good morning.
Go by you.
Morning.
Sort of. But no, you mean the good guys?
Yeah, like the Iraqis that we were helping.
Gotcha. Okay.
I
was joking.
ISIS.
I thought you meant like there were some bad guys in there.
Oh no.
Yeah.
I wouldn't have been in there long.
Hey guys, we're gonna go up here.
Yeah, we'll fight you from up there. You be down here. No, but they had it occupied already. The Iraqis, the good guys. So that was part of the sell. Is we're like, look, it's already occupied by them, which means they have like ground level security. Let us go occupy the top floor, and this would be a perfect observation point because we were kind of waiting for the Iraqi forces that we were supporting to push from the north through Old Mosul, which was like the last stronghold. So we would have been in the building perpendicular to this fight, helping support from there. Mm-hmm. And that's how it got sold. And so we moved in there and set up like this massive OP routine. So it was us with some squadron guys and just like a team. Like we had some linguists and a couple specialists and stuff. And we took the top floor, and like the enemy facing side was all kind of where you had to be tactical. And the way we built it in the back, so there's rooms on the back side, rooms on the enemy side, let's say. Mm-hmm. And on the back side, you could chill out, you could gears there, your bed's there. I went on like the back balcony all the time in suntan.
Yeah.
And then you would go up to the front position, and that would be where we would watch and look for targets and call stuff out. But so a lot of that was supporting by airstrikes, because you could see we were there for 52 days, I think. And it was on and off 1 week at a time or 2 weeks at a time. We'd go back to base and just regroup and see. And because we were just waiting for this Iraqi push essentially. But all that time you get to build a picture of the city, mm-hmm. which is like, sniping's like 95% just watching things. So we had an amazing picture build, like where the sniper team communication was like, this building, here's the range here. And I know we both know exactly where it is. So you imagine looking into a city, I'm telling you like, hey, I see a guy. He's like on the street. And, you're like, there's a million streets. We have everything. It's a way you communicate.
But if you've sniping. Been there for 50 days.
Yeah. And I think, and like I've said before, like what makes, in my opinion, the most lethal sniper teams are the ones that can communicate fast. Mm. So if you're like, you don't have to talk and I just say red building and you know that it's 1,400 meters and I give you a wind call, like,
yeah, then it's done.
That guy doesn't go anywhere.
Right.
But if I'm like, okay, so look all the way from the right, there should be, and you talk too much and then the guy's gone, let's say, Right. So the faster you can be with that team communication, faster the bad guys got.
Yeah.
So we built that picture and became very familiar with everything. So when that Iraqi push finally did happen, and this was like the last week of our tour, we're like, okay, we're sitting here not doing too much.
Yeah.
And I don't want, and this tour, I think ended up being 6 or 7 months. Like, I do not want all of this to have been for nothing. And then we hand it over to the next guys coming in and they support this fight, So the Iraqis ended up pushing and we ended up supporting with sniper fire. And that's where we broke the long shot record.
So how did that go down?
So I think it was the second day of the push. So it was very weird. Like, they were rolling from the north, and at this point it was like from our position around 4K, just over 4K, and it got a little bit closer to us as the fight came on, but it was around 4K, 4.5K, where most of it was happening. And,
which is how many miles for our American
listeners? That's probably like 2.75 miles, something like that. We could look almost conversion calculator. But at that point, we were not shooting our sniper guns. We were looking for airstrike opportunities where we kind of support. But the second day, they started getting closer. And I remember sitting with my buddy, who was the TL of our team, Ben, and I was like, I think today is the day we can start engaging. So to back up, before we went overseas, we came down here to Canadian Texas, trained with Accuracy First. And this company, TACCOM HQ, brought this little piece of gear that was a prism. You put it in front of your scope, and a prism just reflects the image. Yeah. Which was a game changer for long range shooting. Because previously, if you know how a rifle works, you're behind glass, and let's say you can dial your scope, you run out of room at a certain range, right? Like you can only shoot so far. Yeah. And then you can angle your gun up higher if you have a reference point, and you just like that will dictate, other than the round ballistically running out of energy, will dictate how far you can shoot.
Kind of like stacking a pin on a bow.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So like that, and you can imagine you have like 20 pins. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
So the problem is, if you're behind the gun, you can't see now what the spotter's looking at. You're looking at the clouds. If you're lucky, you're looking at a telephone tower or something. So historically, it had been really hard to shoot this far. But now with this prism reflecting the image, you could have your gun where it's required for that elevation or distance,
and you're see the
both
target,
looking at the target. The shooter's looking at the target. The spotter's looking at the target. Game changer.
So, at what point do you need the prism? How far out?
Like it's real handy at like with a 50 cal. I'd say like 2,400 meters. Because
which is
oh yeah, so like
how far is that?
Like 1.5 miles, we'll say.
Yeah,
something like that.
I went to the I did some content for the Army, and I got to shoot with their Army marksmanship unit, and we shot a mile. I got to shoot a mile.
Yeah,
and it was with a gun almost about like a 338.
Okay,
I don't know exactly what the gun was. I can't remember now, but it was raining. God, it was wet. It was cold, and so like Perfect. I mean, I'm pretty extreme, you know. So
yeah.
But anyway, we didn't necessarily need a prism.
Yeah, no, most scopes are good. Like even 2,400 meters, like you're starting to work at the bottom of that reticle. Like you can dial up most of it, but then you've got to start holding in the reticle, you know, like the pins on a bow,
right?
Until you're at the bottom of your reticle and you're maxed out for elevation. In like, I could be wrong ballistically. I think it's like between 2,400 and 2,800, somewhere in there. It's like it's more comfortable to just have on a prism and have the guy in the crosshair.
Gotcha.
So anyway, this little piece of gear was introduced to us, and I think we went out the door with the first one overseas. But when we got it, the point of the story is we were shooting in Texas here, and we were down there with our sniper troop and like some of the chain of command. And when we got it, I was like, I promise you guys, on this tour, we're gonna break the world record.
You just had that feeling.
I had that feeling. I'd been there, and I was like, what this does for us extending the range. Like, it's a whole new world. I'm like, so I was like, I promise you, we will break the world record on this tour.
Yeah.
So it's pretty funny. And then, in that hotel, that fight came kind of from the 4K. I really should have had this set up in miles, but to like the 3.5 kilometer range is 2.2 miles. So that's where it was the next day. And that's when we started engaging these guys. And what we were looking to do at first is just, we're sending sniper rounds so that they would run into a building, and then we'd call an airstrike. And we're just, kind of wrangling them up.
So the goal,
50 cal.
if you hit them, great.
Yeah.
But if you didn't, the goal was just, to get them.
That's right.
Yeah.
And actually, my buddy, so there's the setup we had when this fight kicked off was shooter spotter on one side, it's a four-man sniper team, and maybe 8 to 10 feet over was another shooter spotter team. So there's the four of us, and we're working together, and then just working like in our own little team. So we're kind of just talking back and forth. And at this point, there's a fight happening down there, 3 kilometers away, 3.5 kilometers away. So we moved forward, not like right to the edge of the balcony. We're still sucked in the room, maybe 12 feet or so, but moved forward a bit so that our arcs were wide open, and we were just like, okay, now we can talk out here. There's a fight happening down there. They're not looking this way 3.5 kilometers for anything. because they're fighting in the streets. So we moved forward a bit, and that's how we were running. 2 guys, and it was off these big like dinner tables we found, sort of thing. So the 50 cals on top, spotter behind the shooter, and
you're laying down.
Well, like you're like shooting from a table.
Okay,
so you'd be like sort of like hunched over, standing. The spotter's behind, either sitting on whatever or standing. And we just swapped out back and forth like shooter spotter. So my buddy on the other gun, so Ben and Josh were on the gun to my right, which is our TL, and one of the other guys in our det. I was a 2IC with like my shooter Scott, and Josh had sent around, and it ricocheted and then hit a guy, and it was like, maybe 2.4 miles, something like that, 2.3 miles. And we were both watching this area, and we're like, wow, like that's the longest shot I've ever seen hit somebody. And this guy dropped, and he was on the ground, and they have these little motorbikes ISIS did that would like go pick up their casualties and bring them off to wherever they were treating them. And we're like,
So he broke the record.
Well, it was a hit. He didn't kill the guy.
Yeah.
So we're like, it's just the longest shot I'd ever seen hit somebody. And it was a ricochet off the ground too.
Right.
But we're like, wow. And then shortly after that is when a bunch of fighters were engaging these Iraqis that we were supporting. Sent some rounds, and they hid in this building. We called an airstrike, but it was a dud. Like the missile, like the bomb didn't go off, which was rare. I'd never seen it before. And then out the back, like second story window, this guy started lowering his fighting equipment, and you could see him. He's lowering his AK. So I was spotting at this time. So I was behind the gun, like behind Scott, who was shooting, and on the other side, Josh was shooting, and Ben was behind him. So I'm like, okay, this guy's coming down. I'm like, hey, Scott, corner of this building. Here's your elevation and wind call. He's like, come on, stand by. I'm like, send it. They did the same thing simultaneously, and we didn't know. Like, we didn't coordinate it. So he sends his round. It's like 2 sniper rounds go down. And it's 2.2 miles because this was the long shot. 9.9 seconds later, like almost 10 seconds later, the guy's he's climbed down. He goes down to pick up his gun, and it like hit him right through kind of the back. And it's a 50 cal, so obviously he crumbled. He rolled down this little hill. I'm like, hit. And they're like, hit. I'm like, no, that was us. That was us. We don't know which round it was still. We call it a team effort. But yeah, that was the long one.
Dang.
And ended up right after that, it was a crazy thing is a few more fighters came out of that building, and they ran to the alley, this like corner of an alleyway, because they didn't know where they were getting shot from. And so I'm like, okay, Scott, go over it. And we called it the alley. So he knew exactly where it was. I'm like, go over to the alley, same wind call, like spotter on. He's like, stand by, send it. So he shoots. And now there's 4 of them stacked up on this corner, and they're like looking around the corner, but like we are looking at them, right?
Yeah.
The round goes, and it hits like right between all of their heads, which I didn't, through the spotting scope, 3.5 kilometers, 2.2 miles away, send it. I'm looking at the guys. They all, like the round impacts, and they all hit the ground. It was like something I'd never seen. I was like, did we just get like a triple kill? What? Scott got up from his gun. He's like, oh my God.
Yeah.
I'm like, get back on your gun. But like, and I'm just watching. And then they all like shake it off, slowly get up and run away. And I was like, oh no. But that was almost a crazier shot than like the one that had just happened.
Yeah.
Broke the world record. But it was wild to see.
Dang.
It was wild to see it be so consistent at that range too. Like, cause even just, variance in feet per second because of powder or whatever, like every round, even match grade stuff is, it burns slightly differently. Like the feet per second is a little bit. And at that range, that's a lot.
Mm-hmm.
Like so to see it be that effective and accurate, it was pretty cool.
So you wouldn't be able to shoot the 2.2 mile shot with a, without the prism. You wouldn't be able to see the target in a scope.
That's right. You wouldn't, like, it would be a lot of luck.
Yeah.
We'll say. Because your reference point, the shooter, would be looking into the sky. Like,
right.
Unless there was just so happened to be a telephone tower where it could be like, okay, move up 10 mils, and you can like on the telephone tower, okay, there's where my whole point of aim is. Okay, I'm up 10 mils, send it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Now give me 2 mils to the right for a wind call, and you're just like, oh my God, you're measuring all these little lines.
Right.
It's just way better.
Yeah.
When you can both be looking at the same target.
Is that something they're all using now?
I would assume so. I mean, I'm out now, but we definitely are. And I know the TACCOM HQ is the company, and they have got their products out to the right people.
Yeah. Dang. So and then how many days after the 2.2, you and your team?
We were there still, I think 5 more days, and it was like the best week of sniping, because the fight actually got a little bit closer to us every day. And it was weird. It would only be from like 4:30 in the morning till like lunchtime, and then it would all die down, all the fighting.
Right.
And we're just watching. And the next morning, someone would like either come into our room and be like, "Hey, snipers, like, get on the guns. They're moving about." And it's like, okay, get on and make a coffee and wait for them, switch up on the gun. Yeah, and it got closer and closer and closer. So there's just a lot more engagements.
What were some of the longer shots that you got to make pulling the trigger?
I think it was like 21 to 2200. Oh man, what would that be in miles? So like 1.8 miles, something like that.
Damn.
Yeah, and that was, again, it was this house, and there was like a bunch of fighters there, and we were trying to just get them in there, calling it, because there were so many of them, calling airstrike. And I remember seeing this guy, and it was like what looked to be, because we were looking at kind of the back, looked like it was looking out through the kitchen window, and he's like, they didn't know where the shooting was coming from, and just put one right in, like it's a 50 cal, and now it's also a little bit closer, you could see it more, and like right through center of mass here, he dropped, and then we ended up calling an airstrike anyway, but I was happy to have made the shot before we did.
Right.
Yeah, that was like the only engagement, I think, of mine that I was like very sure of. Everything else, like when I was on the gun anyway, it was like, okay, there's a guy shooting from that window. You put a round in, and then
the shooting stops.
You're like, well, I don't know what's happening on the other side of that.
Yeah.
He's not having a good day because it's a 50 cal, but I don't know what happened. So that was more of mine. It was when I was spotting is when I really got to see the big picture of like effective,
Right.
Like there was a counter sniper. So there's a sniper team that must have been sent out to like see where this fire was coming from. Because one of the guys on the position with us was like, hey, and it was like a squadron guy, and they were looking from like another room. It's like, look under this tractor trailer here. And I was like, okay, I'll keep an eye on it. And I was spotting, and Scott was on the gun. And then like the way the sun changed, I could see there was like a silhouette, and it looked like a sniper silhouette. Like when you go work a sniper course and a student doesn't take into consideration lighting and his background stuff, it's like you leave a silhouette when you're looking for like a student stalking. It's like very telltale sniper thing. And I was like, okay, but it's not moving a lot. It's pretty disciplined if that's a sniper team. And then sure enough, I saw them like in the shadow. So it was underneath like an 18-wheeler trailer. And behind them was like a lighter grass, and they were in the shadow of the truck. You see a little bit of a dark silhouette. I saw them like put down the gun. I saw like the silhouette of the gun move through, and they were moving slowly, like they knew what they were doing. I was like, no way. So he posts up beside the shooter spotter. I could see like the silhouette again. So I get Scott on. He takes a shot. I think it was 2,200 meters. Again, whatever that is in miles, I don't know. 2,250, something like that. And it was off by wind. I made a correction, and he put it like, I like to think it went right through the scope. It's too far to tell. But it hit the shooter, and then the spotter, I could see he got up, and he's like yanking on the rifle, but he must have had it strapped. The shooter must have had like the gun strap on because he couldn't get it. He sent another round, and he just, spotter ran, and I could see him like alleyway. And because I could only see him cross the alleys. We were trying to time it, like he'll be at this alleyway. No, he missed, because it's still probably a 6-second flight time or something, whatever it is. And it's just like he ran out. There was like a report that came in later that we heard intercepted. Like, no more sniper infiltration by daytime. But that was interesting to be like in a counter sniper kind of situation.
Damn. Yeah.
Yeah.
Dang. That would be just one of those situations where just all the years of training just had, like you were out-trained him.
Yeah, and it was something I didn't really...
You had more skill than he did.
Well, that or we had the upper hand in the fact that we were already in position and they had to move in position, which is challenging. You know what I mean? If someone's already watching and now you have to get into position, that's harder than if you're in position. Do you know what I mean? Like the vice versa. So
for sure.
It could have been that. Maybe they were better than us. I don't know. But
right.
We got
Dang, the upper hand. Wow. Yeah, there's no I mean, it's crazy just, reading some of the stories, like it's crazy. There's just a number on paper and then there's no telling how many it actually was.
Yeah.
For guys like yourself.
Yeah. Man, I had a really good time there.
Yeah.
Yeah. And even like not just doing that part of the job we trained so long, but just I think back to it a lot. Like just the chilling in the in the hotel. And there's a lot of times I'd go to the rooftop in suntan.
That's wild.
Then I'd get in trouble.
So when you're in the room that you're sniping out of, you guys are obviously like probably super still.
Yeah, like so a lot of it we end up building the OP so that we can move more freely without being seen. So like the approaches would be behind couches, whatever, and we actually cut a hole through the wall from a bathroom that we could get into, cut a hole in the wall and had our spotting scopes for most of it back through that, like this little hole in the wall. So now it's like top of a building, back of a room, hole in the wall, 3 kilometers away. That's where we're watching from most of the time. It wasn't until the actual fight kicked off where like, okay, we'll move forward, get better arcs, and be able to support and help better. Yeah, so yeah, you build it up, and it's like anywhere we go, it's like we just try and make it a little better every day. We're like cleaning the floors and like making it our own. It was fun. We just like do the OP thing and come back and like smoke these little cigars and watch Alone on an iPad survival show.
Yeah, for sure. And was that your last deployment?
No, I did one more in 2018 or 19. It's been 2018, I think.
So 5 deployments in 10 years?
So 1, 2, 3, 4 deployments. So my first one was 2014. I got out a year and a half ago now. So like from 2014 to 2019, I guess is when it started trickling off for me in special operations. Yeah, it was 5 deployments, I think. And there's a couple little small things I could say. We go here and train some people or go there. But yeah, like deployments to like Iraq or Afghanistan.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the last one was pretty non-eventful.
Right.
Like ISIS had kind of been pushed out. We were just doing like targeting again in cities, and it was slow. And because we'd been there so long, there was a million rules and you needed approvals everywhere. We're just trying to get out the door, and like that one was more annoying.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
it wasn't the Wild West anymore.
No, and that's like anywhere you get a road of zero. It's way less oversight and red tape essentially. And then
how much did that die off from one to the end? Your first
drastically
to the last one,
like drastically. I like even the roto where we made that long shot. It was still, you could tell that we had been in that theater so long because there's so many rules. Like compared to the first roto that I went, the first tour, you could just tell. They're like, oh, this has to now go through a million layers of approvals and generals and this and that, and like, yeah, you could feel it. And then the last one was like, I'm essentially working out and suntanning and shooting my pistol. Like,
I had a buddy that was in. He graduated high school in 2003 and then went, just straight to the Army. Went over there and was in there.
Afghanistan or Iraq?
Iraq.
What year?
In 2004.
2004.
He would have been in Iraq in 2004, and he was talking about like he came back for his second deployment. And they're like, all right, we got some rules now.
Yeah.
You guys can't run over people in the Humvee.
Yeah. Come on.
Yeah, like just like had a little bit more oversight than they did in the but like, I can't imagine. So you got out a year and a half ago, so 2022.
Yeah, in April this year it'll be 2 years out.
Yeah.
But there was like,
so there was nothing going on then.
Not for me. There was, it was like a fizzle out of my career.
Yeah. And then did the drama really just start after Sean's deal, or had that already started for you?
No, that had already started. Yeah. Sean is where I just like started talking about it.
Did they pull his podcast down?
They did at first. So as soon as he released it, I remember I was in Montana going to do Andy Stump's Cleared Hot podcast, and he just put it out. Sean just put his out, and then there was like this big response. CanSoftCom sent him like a cease and desist on the thing. It was like, there's all these legal concerns with it. You got to take it down. And so he calls me, and I'm driving back from Montana, and he's like, man, this is what I just got. Like, what is this? And I'm like, let me send it to somebody. So I sent it to a friend, and they're like, this is nothing. Like, this is from a CanSoft major. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, he has no business sending this. He's probably going to get fired. Like, it's not CSIS or RCMP, which if it was country to country done properly, that's like, anyway, there's a bunch of things where he's like, you can just laugh at this. Like, good enough for me. So I told Sean, he's like, okay. So he talked about it, did another podcast with a lawyer about it, and like ended up putting up the episode again. I think he talked to CanSoftCom, like, well, okay, what's the big concern? And they're like, they didn't really have anything specific.
Yeah.
Because prior to going on his podcast, I had consulted with probably 20 different operators, like from low level to high level to retired to like high ranking officers, like everyone.
Yeah.
And I was like, here's what I'm going to go do, and here's what I'm going to say, and here's what I'm going to talk about. Is there anything I'm missing in terms of like actual operational security? You know what I mean? Like, like
for sure.
Stuff we just don't talk about.
For sure.
Like, no, I think just, maybe don't mention this or that. And I was like, yeah, okay, I wasn't planning to. Good.
And also, like, he's a Navy SEAL.
Yeah.
You were, what podcast were you? Maybe 40 or something like that?
Oh, I can't remember.
But there had been a bunch,
Yeah.
He had talked to Rob O'Neill already about
the funny thing is the story of this shot, our own government put it out. I think it was like a week later. Well, we still had guys in that position. That is an operational security concern.
Right.
Because it was my brother-in-law, his sniper team, that took the position from us. And because of that article, they got bombed.
Oh, you mean a week after the shot?
After the shot in 2017. Damn. They put
that building got bombed.
Because the article was out, and they had to like quickly exfil, lose that position, and like were put in danger.
But years later, you can't just.
But years later, I can't
casually tell the story.
Yeah.
So. When everybody's out of everywhere.
The big part that I realized is there was a COVID portion attached to my story.
That's right.
And that's what they didn't want out.
Yeah.
So they were just pulling at straws, like, don't talk about this or that or this. And I'm like,
they didn't like the fact that like
it didn't look good, I think.
You weren't part of the pandemic.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that was like how my career ended.
Which is weird because like it's not like they're secretive about how aggressive they are with all the bullshit around.
Yeah. I don't know if
shot
it's like
and all that.
Yeah, no, it got crazy.
I mean, like you can't even go into the country without it. So like, what's the big deal that we've got Dallas Alexander, who is like, hey, I'm kind of a little bit more on the freedom side of the aisle. I don't understand like why that would, I don't know.
Yeah. Oh, I get it. It was very mind boggling.
Well, both of our governments seem to make decisions that the people find mind boggling.
Yeah, this is true. This is true. You guys have not escaped it either.
No, we have not. So thankfully, maybe there's a ray of sunshine, a ray of hope for both of us, but we got to get rid of both of our leaders right now.
Yes,
Get them out of office.
Yes, sir.
Someone new in office.
Yeah.
Maybe they can just be buddies and they can both go to some
island
somewhere and hang out together. Yeah. Wearing stripes, hopefully, but anyways, whatever. Yeah. It's hard to hide my thoughts and beliefs sometimes, but that's not necessarily what my show revolves around. And I'll talk about it, but it's just not necessarily. I myself am not. I don't feel educated enough to really speak too much on all of it. To be honest, like I would, before I did that, I feel like I would need to have been through what someone like yourself has been through. You know, like I feel like that should be a prerequisite for somebody.
Even me, like the whole thing was just I believe quite a bit in freedom.
Mm-hmm.
And that was it. And I'm like, I'm not trying to tell anyone what to do or what they should or shouldn't do. And like, I don't know enough about politics to be commenting on everything. And like,
yeah,
I'm just like, I just want to be able to make my own decision on, let's say, what goes into my body.
Yeah.
That's it. Like, make an assessment. If I want to talk to a doctor, talk to a doctor. None of them could give me answers. If we're talking about like the shot stuff, I'm like, I'm just about freedom. Like,
right.
I'm not an extremist. Do you know what I mean?
For sure.
And then with the political side, I'm like, look, this is just, it's weird.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Man, it's crazy how, well, there for a little bit, they just had everybody so worked up and scared, like legitimately. Everybody was just so scared.
Oh, and I get it. Like there's some, like if you watch the news, I understand why you wanted it and all the boosters. Like,
yeah.
I mean, I don't watch the news, so maybe that's why.
Yeah. I just, and then for me, like, regardless of how dangerous the actual, COVID-19 is in and of itself, it's just like, all right, well, I'm not going to sacrifice freedoms. Like, like I'm still going to, all right, there's a risk of me getting severely sick. And, like, okay, well, there's a risk of a lot of things, and I'm just not going to sacrifice freedoms for that. And I understand if somebody decided that they wanted to, take a shot, like you said, I'm with you. Like, I don't want to be told I have to.
Yeah. Like, look, these companies.
And the moment you do tell me I have to, now I'm not going to.
I want it even less.
Yeah. No. Even if it was going to work. Yeah. Matter of fact, I'm not even going to take the flu shot anymore.
That's right. Well, I actually looked at it like the flu shot at first, and I've always declined the flu shot because I'm like, oh, I actually don't mind. I rarely get the flu, and when I do, it's not that bad.
Yeah.
So I'm like, I don't need it, and I've become like, this is as I age, a little bit more aware of ingredients and what goes into my body and stuff. So I'm like, I feel like I don't need that. I just looked at this the same way at first, like, oh, there's another shot for this thing, and I'm like, oh. Kind of like the flu, and I don't take the flu shot. So I'm like, the first one was just like, oh, no thanks. You know what I mean? Like, it doesn't have to be a big deal. Just no thanks.
Right. And that's what sucks about this whole deal with your story is like, you're not trying to make a big deal out of anything.
No. And I was like ready to be a team lead on a deployment to Africa. And I was like excited about it. I'd never like deployed in this area. And then it just like all crumbled. I'm like,
and then
it doesn't have to be such a big thing.
Yeah, like I just don't want to do this one deal, like
yeah.
And why is it such a, I don't know, like why are you just ruining people's lives over it?
Yeah.
Why can't we just disagree?
Yeah.
And there's a lot of people, like I've had some guys here that were going to be potential interns, and it was crazy one day here in the warehouse. Usually we'll have one person a day come in and shop. I'm out in the middle of nowhere. Yeah. But then this one day I had this borderline lifer that had been in the Air Force and had like 18 years. He was about to get out. And then there was that same day, there was this young, fresh out of boot camp Marine. And they're both faced with the same life decision. The lifer had like, a wife and 3 kids, and like he's about to be retired, at 20 years, and like he's gonna have all these benefits, and they both were faced with the decision of getting that shot, and they had to, and the Air Force guy, like he was borderline in tears, like explaining to me and this young guy, because the young guy didn't have anything to lose. Like, heck, he just got out of boot camp. He's in shape. And he's like, no, I'm not going to do it. They kick him out, and he goes and does something else. Like, whatever,
Totally.
And this other, it was me watching like, dang, this is so complicated. It's been made so complicated, especially now years later when, a couple years later when everybody's like, okay, it doesn't actually prevent anything. Yeah. And you could still, it's like, damn, y'all ruined some people's lives over this.
It was,
Dallas being one of them.
I felt bad. They made my life better. I had a very good career. I was happy with it. Mm-hmm. But like, I'm blessed to be playing country music now and just to hear more from my family.
Yeah. Let's talk about that instead of that other bullshit. Can't blame my bloodline. So like, it's crazy how much of like so there's Nashville, and then we have down here Texas country.
Oh yeah.
It's wild how similar you sound to the Texas country guys.
Well, I think it's because
the kind of music I listen to.
I'm such a big fan of it. Like
really?
This is where I want to come play music. So if you're out there and you got a music venue, you need an opener gig somewhere, you just give me a shout. I'm going to be spending a lot of time in Texas because I want to play music here.
When do you plan on coming back?
I don't know. So I'm working on the visa right now.
Mm-hmm.
So I need a visa to be able to play music here. And that process is underway. So as soon as that's done, I think we're going to probably move down here for a handful of months at a time between here and Nashville. Nashville's a great hub for insanely talented artists.
Yeah, for sure.
So it's a really good place to go and write and be inspired and stuff. But like, this is where my favorite music kind of is and my sound, and I really love it in Texas. So I think we were talking about it. Don't know where yet.
Yeah.
It might even bounce around a little bit, but just come and start playing.
Yeah, there's a lot of in Austin, with the music scene. There's a big movie scene in Austin. And then obviously, with Joe there's a comedy scene.
Yeah, and a bunch of podcasts. So there's
a lot of podcasts.
Podcasting out of Austin.
It's not far from San Antonio, which has got a lot of like creators and influencers. College Station, Huntsville has like college towns, but Fort Worth is pretty good.
I heard that.
Fort Worth is, I usually try to stay away from downtown Austin and Dallas. Those two, like,
okay, good to know.
I mean, Austin's it's great, but there's just a vibe on certain parts of Austin and in Dallas that don't necessarily fit a cowboy from West Texas.
Yeah.
We've just got a little different, but Fort Worth is very much would welcome this.
Okay.
Have you been to the stockyards?
No.
Yeah. So
I have like a full day here tomorrow and the rest of today. So I was just going to go explore. So you point me in the right direction. I'll go.
Yeah. The Fort Worth stockyards.
Okay.
When's your flight out?
Not till the morning of the 20th.
Okay.
I got like all day tomorrow.
So I got a deal later today. You do have all day tomorrow?
Yeah.
Yeah. So we should meet up. Okay, cool.
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah. Because the stock show and then, we could take you, we'll do something, go to the stockyards or something.
Love to.
I can show you Fort Worth, but essentially though, those are kind of the places. And then most of Texas is like what you see here, like little bitty towns like this.
Yeah, I think I really like that. Like when we would come train here and it was Canadian Texas, that little county.
That's up in the Panhandle.
Yeah. But the town just had like one like saloon in it. And I went in one day, there's live music. And then I was following it a bit and they'd have artists that I like roll through there sometimes. And
so so your album, is this your first album?
This is my first like studio album. I put out a live album a while ago, and that was more because I was starting to play bar shows, and everyone kept asking me if I had music out, and I didn't. So there was a lot of places just weren't booking me. So I recorded one of my shows of just all original songs, and I put it out as a acoustic, like a live album. And that one was out. I think because I listened to it, and then I listened to the growth over a couple of years of playing. This album I really like. That one I'm like, I'll probably take it down after once this one's all out.
It's just not what you're.
Yeah, I mean, I get some good response. There's people that really love the song. I'm kind of torn actually because I get some really nice messages about the songs, and so I'm like, we'll see what happens. But yeah, this is my first studio album, and I'm excited to have it out on vinyl. There's 2 of the songs that are out on like Spotify and Apple and stuff like that.
And is Can't Blame My Bloodline is one of them.
Yeah,
right?
Can't Blame My Bloodline is the newest one out, and Child of This Land was the one I put out before. And then other than that, you can only hear it on this vinyl.
Mendota Ranch. Jason Abraham.
I think I heard of that place actually.
Mendota Ranch. Yeah. Sorry. So that's Jason Pelham and Jason Abraham. So, anyhow, I'm sorry to be distracted. I was just really curious if it's the same person. It must not be.
Right.
I'm sure they know each other. Being in Canadian Texas, like that town has like 5,000 people in it.
It's very small.
One question I had: when did what's TL stand for?
Like team leader.
Team leader. Okay, so when did he become your actual brother-in-law? Was it his sister or your sister?
No, his sister
is who you married.
Yeah, but we're still engaged. We got engaged right before we weren't allowed to travel. Anyway,
okay.
We want to do a destination, so we're kind of planning it right now.
Oh, cool.
I call her my wife. We've just been together a while, so it's essentially my wife.
Gotcha.
But yeah, that was I want to say 2014, 15. Like I met her just I think a little bit before our first deployment together. And then it was funny because I asked his permission if I could like take her out on a date, and he was like, "Hell no."
That's hilarious.
That's like, oh man, okay. So at first, actually, it's his fault. I was living in an area downtown in Ottawa, and she was working at this like fancy restaurant. He's like, "Oh, you got to go check this place out." I was like, "Oh, it's a little fancy for me." He's like, "I'll go." He's like, "Sarah works there. It's amazing." And I didn't even clue in. Like I'd known at some point that he'd had a sister, but like I just didn't clue in. I didn't remember. So I go to the bar and like order a drink, and then I'm like, "Wow, who is this?" And then we chat a bit, and like I did not put it all together. We're going to the shooting range the next week, and he's like, "Oh, did you ever go check out that restaurant, Giovanni's?" And I was like, "Yeah, I went in," and I was like, "You wouldn't believe who the." And then like before I said it, I was like, "Oh my god, like that was your sister."
That's hilarious.
Then he like gets angry, but so I started going back there more.
Yeah,
and we were chatting a little bit, and then I asked his permission to take her over for dinner, and he's like, "No, hell no." I was like, okay, fair enough. So I told her, I'm like, yeah, we can't really chat anymore. And then I guess in the background, she was harassing him. And eventually he sent me an angry message. Like, and he's like a very intense guy anyway. He's like, look, call Sarah. She wants to go out for dinner or some bullshit. It's like, that was like his permission to me, you know? I think he planned it all so that we could be brother-in-laws, and we live right beside each other too.
Well, so not to get too much into your personal, but I was on an event, a Can-Am event. They're originally out of Canada, and I was for 3 or 4 days. I was hanging out with this family, but they were telling me that like a lot of people, like married people, don't get married as often in Canada. Is that a thing?
I feel like the French people bring down the percentage, the ratio. There's
so maybe it was more like French specific.
Well, it would bring down the whole number. I got, it would bring down the average, because like I got a lot of French buddies who are like, oh no, we don't get married. Like,
okay,
like
so it was French specific. It's not a Canadian thing.
I don't think so. I've never heard that before outside of like.
You don't think it's a Canadian thing?
No, I don't.
I got you. Okay, I'd only heard that from one person, so I wasn't real sure if that was like a
fact check that.
Yeah. Cool, man. Well, today's an exciting day. I do have I got to get to Dallas this afternoon, but I have, we're going to go buck some bulls real quick.
Very cool.
And some horses. All right. If if you'd like, love to have you over there, and we'll go do that. And
I would love to.
Yeah. So I don't know if you've been to a practice pen or anything. I know you've been to a rodeo. This will be kind of front row. These are a little toned down than what you might see at a rodeo.
It's funny. Sarah gave me one warning and one rule coming down here. She's like, don't get on a bull. I was like, well, I mean, we'll see. I'm not a bull rider, but like, let's say it was offered. She's like, you're going down with one rule.
That's hilarious.
And then even my daughter, who's now just turned 3, was like, yeah, Papa, you can't get on a bull because you could break your finger or your shoulder, she told me.
Yeah.
And then she's like, you can't play guitar.
Well, this has been a really cold snap for us, 5-6 degrees, and so we have not been practicing for the last week. Yeah. And so today is the first nice day of the week of the month of the year, I guess. And so we're itching to get out and just do something, buck something. So that's why it's so quiet, because everybody's over there already getting ready.
Yeah.
So
all right.
Everybody check out Dallas Alexander. Can't Blame My Bloodline. Look him up on Instagram.
This record you can only get on my website right now. So dallasalexander.ca. And that's because I'm offering the whole first press, 1,000 records, all signed, all autographed.
Yep. I'm going to get this one signed. So check it out online so you can get a signed copy, and make sure it's in focus. There it is, right there. So check that out. I'm Dale Brisby, and I'm on to the next one, old son. Thanks, Dallas, for coming on, buddy.
Thanks for having me, man. I really appreciate it.
It's good to finally meet you.
Yeah, likewise.
Pow, pow.